Farmers Union United and Hawaii Farmers Union Foundation convention here in the middle of probably the most important agricultural area in Hawaii. I don't know if this is accurate, but I feel, or in Maui I should say. It is, I feel as though the Hawaiian Islands have the distinction of inventing regenerative polyculture on a large civilization scale, feeding a million plus people, and much more recently inventing GMO monoculture seed development. So now we got a choice, where do we go next? And to the extent that we hope and can be part of it, today we're going to be talking about cultivation. I don't know if the others on this panel share this feeling, but I'm relieved that we're getting in the soil and talking about this, because yesterday was a lot about policy and different applications on the plant and how do we all play nice. So today we get to be farmers, which is, and it's all important. We got to do it all. So I'll do a quick introduction, and we're going to be a little bit free for all, making maybe our first thing that you should really know before cultivating hemp cannabis. I personally believe it's one plant, but we do have people that focus on hemp, and we do have people that focus on so-called psychoactive cannabis on this, and then people who are or have done both.
Doug,
So,
I'm sorry to interject. Can you try to use the microphone for our sake?
Absolutely.
I know everybody in the room can probably hear you, but thank you guys.
all right,
Appreciate
sure.
it.
So my name is Doug Fine, and although I don't consider myself in the same class of cultivators as the others on this panel, I have cultivated hemp over the last 5 seasons, and then this year finally start to finish day-to-day in my home crop in New Mexico, which, you know, really proud of it. I feel really good about it, and got to harvest with my family, and my boys are separating seed right before I got on the plane to come out here. I grow dioecious, male and female, which is a little against the grain of the immediacy of what's happening in cannabinoids and CBD. And if there's one thing, this is the same thing maybe everybody can do with their intros, is tell you one thing you wished people knew before you grew hemp cannabis. There's one thing I wish I knew, whoops. One thing I wish I knew about before, I would say focus. I have to give 2 because I'll give a subtropical tip, because I cultivated with the University of Hawaii project for a few years. Overall tip is soil. The health of the soil is the health of the crop. I would say there's more danger of overwatering than underwatering at the beginning, and this is just higher altitude, not for subtropical. For subtropical was the only predation that I ever experienced in hemp, and it was only on the first crop before we learned how to deal with it organically, and it was like snail slug at 15% of the keikis. So that was just something that had to be dealt with. I can show you some pictures from that project, and let's just go down the line and have each of these incredible farmers introduce themselves and say.
So yeah, you don't have to speak like right at the mic, so you can be like a foot away, or.
How's that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Good enough?
Perfect. White crop.
Yes. So I'm going to just echo again what we just heard, and it's really all about the soil. You know, we realize that people have been lavish with their, crops in the past when we felt they have really high value, and now people are growing hemp out in the field in large acreages, and we see them putting hardly or no fertilizers and still trying to, pull things out of the land, which isn't quite what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is build healthy soil and leave it in better condition for future cropping. So really, I just want to echo the same kind of thing. Any kind of practices of natural farming, rejuvenative type of farming that you can implement in your operation, that's pretty much basic on anybody's large scale right now.
And introduce yourself, and you cultivate on the Big Island, Cab, right?
Yeah, I'm Cab Baber. We have a hemp permit. My wife Gail and I have a place up in Hawai'i on the North Shore, and so we're in process. We work with university in the past too with seed strains and planting some plants to see what they would do, and remediating the soil is really what it's all about. And so like with the Farmers Union a few years ago, we kind of introduced that if we cropped hemp 3 times, just let it go back into the earth 3 times, we condition and clean up our soil, even all this land that we have here. Then we can decide what to do with it. It wouldn't be setting it up for continual cropping of hemp necessarily. It can go into tree forest crops, Hawaiian native species. It could go into other things that would be more permanent and hold the water table in a better way. So basically it's about remediating the soils we have, utilizing the hemp as a tool to do so, because it's really great at it, and building that soil so then it can receive the next crop, which is going to feed us well and sustain us, and also provide us export if we really want to do export. So I see it as a transition kind of crop, and it is about building healthy soil. I have been making microorganisms for 25 years. EM Bokashi is something I've been making for people, and I love this product. If you're not familiar with it, you should check it out, and we'll let somebody else talk a little bit there. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, let's see, which one of these? Okay. How's that? Does that sound right? Yeah, my name's Greg Smith. I own Earth Matters Hemp. I have one of the permits on the Big Island. I farm down in Ka'u, the southernmost hemp farm in the USA. I'm right on South Point Road, so I'm about as southern as you can get. And so I grow hemp in the tropics. This is as close to the equator as we can get in the United States. So we have certain issues here when it comes to growing down in the tropics. One is we have it's the sun that we have. It's so intense and strong that it seems to push all these high CBD strains over the limit. So it makes it a little more difficult here than it does in, say, Colorado or Nebraska or Northern California. So that's one of the issues that we have to always be aware of, is the strength of the sun and the ability to push that THC level up. So we have to deal with that as one of our problems. I got involved with this about 4.5 years ago, actually, and I got the first permit. It wasn't a permit, it was actually a contract with the Department of Agriculture to grow hemp seed for the state. So they actually paid me $75,000 to grow hemp seed, which was amazing. So it gave me the freedom to kind of just work with it, learn and research. Luckily, there was no amount of seed that I had to come up with. Basically, I just had to figure out what would be the best genetics for the state. We had some problems because we couldn't get a hold of seed genetics from the Department of Agriculture. They said that they could only import seed from a foreign country. We couldn't get seed from Colorado, Oregon, anywhere. And because they thought it was some kind of federal regulations, and if they shipped it in, that they would break some law and blah, blah, blah. So we went through all this trouble. They sent us seed from Jamaica. It took us about 3 months to get it. It arrived, not one of the seeds germinated. So we were really getting set back, and then they finally decided they were going to buy seeds from China. So they bought this strain from China called Yuma, and another one called Puma. But so they sent it to the university and to me and to one other person who got the permit, and so we started growing that. And eventually we found out that, well, the reality is in China they don't have regulations on THC and CBD. So the strains were all hot. So we ended up having to spend a lot of time, a lot of wasted time trying to develop genetics. Finally, the Department of Agriculture gave me permission to grow what we call local varietals. And that was seed strains that I had been working with for about 1.5 years. They were the Otto strain out of Colorado, and the Bach strain out of Colorado, and a cherry wine out of Oregon. And so they gave me permission to start working with that, and that's about halfway into my contract. So we finally got those seeds started, grew them out, were able to get some strains that we thought were pretty stable. We shipped them to the Department of Agriculture, and then they gave them to the people who got permits. Some of those strains still went hot. And so it's a difficult thing here in Hawaii to stay under 0.3. It's just one of the most, it's the real challenge. So after that, I completed the contract, and then I got my permit. And once I got my permit, I really kept working on genetics. So I kept working on seed strains that would be adaptable to Hawaii and could be high in CBD. I got my first successful test at 0.22 and 6% CBD, which is a nice mix. And then I got one that was 0.16 and 3.9, I think it was. And the only way it really worked was because we had to harvest fairly early to make sure that we stayed under those guidelines. But once we got our, a successful harvest, We then started working on some more genetics, and we got some stuff now that I think is going to be really good. We still have to grow it out. We have to find out what kind of, how high the CBD THC levels are. The terpene levels were amazing. They're over the top. You couldn't tell a difference between this strain and any high cannabis plant.
Anybody not know what terpenes are? Show of hands. Component of a plant often associated with smell. Lily's the real interest of this. It's a hydrocarbon, and it's gives extra elements of the plants outside of the cannabinoids.
Yeah. So we grew those out, and now I've got a successful crop. I've got seeds that now I have a seed license, so I legally can sell CBD seeds in the United States. And to anyone who wants to buy it, I'm supposed to sell them just to permitted people. We can sell to just about anybody. I don't really know how they can enforce that, but so if anybody's interested in seed, you can just look me up Earth Matters Hemp and contact us. And I've got seed here right now, and in fact, if you folks are interested, I will give you some.
Wow,
Yeah, so you guys can start planting, because this plant needs to get planted. I mean, we're really we need to see what we can do with this, and there's not many. I mean, right now I think there's maybe three acres that's been under cultivation, and my acre that makes 4 for the whole state, compared to all the other states out there. So it shows you how far behind we are in the ability to get hemp into the field.
What island is that?
Big Island.
Okay.
Greg, there's 41,000 acres right here.
Yeah.
We can start
Yeah, look.
this afternoon. We can start.
Actually, I've got enough seed to plan out this afternoon if anybody wants to help, and we can get some of it.
Michael, I really appreciate you coming this way too. Also, Big Island from the more north. Tell us about a little bit about what you do, and then the one thing that you'd like to give advice to before you wish you knew about before planting hemp.
Okay. First of all, I did go to Cal. I majored in smoothies, and I minored in Vitamix. Put the two together, you got a snack bar. So we're growing on the wet side of the Big Island, 155 inches of rain a year, and the plants love it. And I've grown in Arkansas, I've grown in Minnesota. As a child, I ate the Indian gum, we called it. It was ditchweed, but in the middle it's soft, so we would chew on that. So I've been on it since I was 7. I didn't realize it with the plant. And I harvested in Kansas in September, harvest season. It grows fields of it just everywhere because the cows don't eat it. So when you go out there, all the wild hemp is growing everywhere. It's a beautiful plant. And I just keep thinking, well, that's a tropical setting. August in Arkansas is like Hilo all year. So I know it will grow in a variety of climates. The indica plant has been hybridized to be a short season plant. Likes a little bit cooler, comes from the mountains of the Himalayas. But that's what we're working with the CBD. What our intention is to experiment with different ways to companion plant the plant. So we are companion planting with herbs, especially basil, mushrooms, mulch mushrooms, we've got that growing. So you can imagine the psilocybin mushroom companion planted with the hemp and the healing properties there. I don't know if they're going to inspect for that, but it's one of the things we're doing. So a lot of experiments are happening on and we're just starting small with a 1 acre farm and hope to get 5,000 plants in a sea of green grow on 1 acre. So what I'm learning is how to manage this acre. When you harvest, what you put in there in the meantime, what are your cover crops going to be, what works best for hemp. Things of that nature. But we'll talk more.
Yeah, we'll come around the second time and talk techniques. That's great. Boy, that's fantastic. And by the way, 1 acre, that's my experience. You hear someone starting out with 1 acre or 3 acres as a higher success rate than people saying, oh, I'm just going right to 250. So Ron is a elite amongst the elite. He's a humble guy, so I'm sure I'm embarrassing him. But how can I phrase this? I'm not just the hair club president when I say he's a fine grower. I'm not exactly a customer. I'm a friend. And can I talk about the Willie's? He's got under contract with Willie's Reserve, so they.
We're not under contract.
Oh, but you do cultivate for him?
Yeah. He sells my bud.
Awesome.
They sell my bud. Are you They take it.
Take it away, Ron. So, and also, let's be clear, outdoor cultivation under God's sun is the highest quality. So take it away, Ron.
I love growing marijuana. I'm not very good at computers, but I'm lucky to be able to be up in Humboldt and have a legal farm. And the question that you asked is soil for me. I basically am a dirt farmer the way I see it. My dirt now is 10 years old, and I just feed the soil. And the soil, the symbiotic relationship with the mycelium and the bacteria, gives the plants everything that they need. And it seems like the less inputs and the less things I do, the better people like my weed. So I pretty much just let it happen, you know, from my point of view. And yeah, terpenes are the thing as well. They seem to really come out when they're just left to the natural way.
Not protecting you very well.
Oh.
Ron, quick follow-up question. I'm gonna go around the second time visualizing that this temporary nonsense we're still dealing with of farmers harming their own crop to keep THC down. That's a endangered thing. But to the fact that it exists for the moment, where if you're a good farmer, your plant wants some THC. What would you say if, amendment-wise or anything, if somebody wants to go from soil prep time to mitigate THC? I've heard all kinds of things. I have a mentor who says actually higher nitrogen might mitigate THC, contrary to what you might think, because the plant is getting so much help that it doesn't need to produce as many of its normal defenses or whatever. I'm just curious if you have any theory, if you want to do the opposite of conventional wisdom and mitigate THC in a crop, would you have any suggestions?
I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, I do think from getting a lot of tests, I've been getting tests done for about 5 years. And it does seem like the plant can only produce so much stuff. So if I have something that comes in like 4 terpene profile, a lot of times the cannabinoids are what suffers because, you know, the plant can only produce so much stuff. Another thing I did learn is the less that you feed the plant, especially artificial, you know, feather meal, even feather meal, stuff like that, it just seems like the better the plant does. Like, it needs to have what it needs, but if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to really jack it up, it has a worse result. So maybe you could overfeed it, but then you're going to have mold. But I wouldn't have any idea about that. I mean,
well, it's a temporary problem. We're going to go, Lily?
The higher in elevation you go, the higher the essential oils are produced. So I would imagine to your statement there, if that's kind of balancing that way, that may have an additional impact. And that's why the Himalayan cannabis is so different than the cannabis that's grown at ocean.
It might also explain why my New Mexico crop tested at 0.25 and the same cultivar in Arkansas tested at 0.9, same year, literally the same source seed. And it's another reason we got to get away from THC. Question? Okay, so let's go around for round 2. Was there a question?
No, I just something to add to that.
Go ahead, sir.
A little bit of a follow-up. People in Hawaii that have been here for a long time and grown in Hawaii a long time, whether you're a grower or you're an agent that's been part of Green Harvest, everybody knows that the 7,000 foot mark is like the magic level. You know, that's where like our really strong terpene profiles come out. The Hawai'i gives beautiful water, but it doesn't degrade. But that's kind of the opposite of hemp farming. So that way, that'd be great for medicine, you know, for the THC side. But if you're doing hemp, you're gonna have to develop a strain that would, you know, survive that kind of environment and still produce low THC. It could still be a great thing because of the terpene profile. So something to consider.
This is so awesome. Like, I'm learning multiple things from what everybody's saying. So this is a really great crowd. I think the pros are learning from each other. So for round 2, we're gonna visualize success. Was there a question?
Well, I was just, this is a question directed to Ron. Thank you guys so much. With what you're saying about input to the plant, does that include yield as well? You find the yield?
You know, since I started growing, it's been a minute, and when I first started, all there was the green shit and the blue shit. It was salt fertilizer, hydroponic, you know. Sorry about the... But then we went organic, and it was Botanicare. They had the best organic liquids, and I was, you know, dumping it all and doing it, you know, and it was working fantastic. And then as I got deeper and deeper into organics, and I started using less and less and less, making my own highly fungal compost. That's a big part of it. And just using organic inputs. And this last year, I went a step further, and all we did was cover crop. And then we had our NPKs come in, and we needed no NPK with our soil tests. So that this year it was just cover crop, and it's hard to say on the yields because we had the worst year in Humboldt ever. The sun just didn't come out till like August. It was just bizarre veg season. But it seems as about the same to me with the sun situation we had, and it's the best expression of all my strains that I've seen came from that. So.
Thank you.
Cover crop.
It's fun. Go ahead.
Just one quick lesson. If anybody is growing the plant, the biggest mistake you can make is you can try too hard. Don't overdo everything. If you read the labels on the fertilizer, give them half to a quarter of what they're saying.
It's kind of like training your plants. You have to train them.
It's also helicopter parenting is how I think about it. I'm like, I wake up, I make sure my human kids are okay, my goat kids are okay, and then I'm like, okay, how are the plants doing? What do you guys do? You guys have? So this is the University of Hawaii Yuma crop that Greg was talking about, Chinese cultivar. It's grows really well. It did the work. You know, there's a lot of people that know this better than I about how in the subtropics. Everything grows. There's a lot of competition. It's can be difficult to bring things to fruition, and moisture can affect flower and all that. But I don't know if you experienced it with Yuma. It did its thing. It was totally happy. And what I found is that Chinese-derived cultivars in general tend to be really adaptive. The plant intelligence thing, I'm no longer. I used to be a little bit ashamed about talking about plant intelligence, but I thought the Yuma learned the phyto period and learned how to grow in the field. So I think a lot of hemp does that, but not necessarily all hemp, and a lot of plants do it. So going around this time, let's visualize what I think is inevitable, which is an end game of THC irrelevance to the farmer. Right now we're putting way too much burden on the farmer on all sides of the cannabis plant, and it absolutely has to go away. Very briefly, for folks who weren't here yesterday when we talked a lot of policy, the number one reason for this is that when you go to processing for any type of cannabis, hemp, anything, most processing methods at scale concentrate your cannabinoids, and you're always going to be over today's ridiculous 0.3 levels in the processing room, and nobody's got a problem with that. So there should be no problem with a farmer growing over 0.3, even if the end game is hemp. All that should matter is the retail market. If there is something that could be an adult product going to people in the market, that obviously can be regulated. But these pants, as Greg pointed out, these Chinese-grown hemp yoga pants, probably their flower tested at 7% THC, and that is why the quality of Chinese hemp fiber is the highest in the world right now. So we have to end the THC thing. So we're going to visualize that, and now we're going to just give real cultivation advice, not how to mitigate THC advice. I'll start as the most novice farmer by saying I planted a 1/2 inch of depth. The hemp crop likes moisture at germination time. Seed to soil contact is important. In other words, if whether you're using a seed drill or hand planting, if you're hand planting, it's just little wee all the way home, pinky, up to, first or second knuckle, depending on your hand size. But, you want the contact. So if you use a seed drill, something should be following behind, like a squeegee or something, to be making sure that there's seed soil contact. And then from there, I found that water is not that big an issue. Every climate's going to be different, but in New Mexico, 57-foot high desert, I was overwatering at the beginning, just Mike's advice. It was my first New Mexico crop. It was my home crop. I cared about it so much, and I didn't want the little babies to get thirsty. And really, I learned, you know, you don't need to water that much. And but keep an eye on your crop. You know, don't go into farming if you don't like being in your field every day. I personally don't like feminized seed. There's a lot of opinions on this kind of thing. I cultivate the way people have cultivated for the last 8,000 years, but now in the last 10 years, 80% of hemp farming has switched to sensimilla, flower oil only, and there are others that are much better at this than I am. For various reasons, I grow dioecious male and female crops. As many of you know, at solstice, well, it's going to be different up here, but when 12 and 12, daylight and darkness, shorter days start the flowering process. The vegetative phase turns into the flowering phase, and that will be also the seeded phase when you have male and females. And for harvesting seed, you harvest ideally when seed is 70% ripe, which means 70% of the seeds are emerging from the calyx. They're too strong to crush in your fingers, and they're turning brown from green. There's some exceptions to that, but that's generally the way to go. So those are most of my overall basic tips, and happy to take any questions, but then you're going to get into it with the experts here.
All right, thank you. So to, again, kind of further what we're talking about, water usage is a big thing everybody's been talking about, especially growing hemp. And because we love our soil, I'm a farmer and I grow many different crops, but really I'm growing soil. And so growing soil is what I've been paid to do for quite a while, and using an effective microorganism like this bokashi that I produce is a way for people to take that shortcut and really get into the game quickly in natural farming. So I'd like to pass this around. Everybody should take a smell of this and take a bite, a taste if you want. You know, but it's made out of food grade substrate, so out of a brewery, so it is on barley. But everything it says on that label, it does for us in the farming world. If we look at the current farming that will change, the larger farms like in Oregon, they use bokashi, they use earthworm castings, they use biochar. That's it. They don't put anything else. And they're pulling off really good crops and they're rating fine. So it is one of the ways you can start your basic farm. You're still going to improve your soil. You're not putting a whole lot of amendments down, but you are growing your soil. And then if we get rid of the limits and we're allowed to, run it up like China and then really feed it, well, this is going to complement whatever it is that you do feed to your soil. It's going to help it assimilate into the soil. It's going to help that soil start to rejuvenate. And in Hawaii, my personal experience is I've seen this proprietary microorganisms grow an inch of soil every year. And I mean black dirt. You can dig down to where the dirt isn't black anymore. You go, wow, that's 5 inches in 5 years. Wow. And it took me a long time to understand this that I'm telling you. But once I saw it enough times and I had to remove gardens that I built this terrific soil in just by growing it in place, then that's the kind of thing we need to do. It's not about hauling tons of organic matter in necessarily, it's about growing it right there in place. I still love to have tons of organic matter, like fields of hay or whatever we can chip up and make into fertilizer. That's going to be a great thing too when we can feed our plants really well. But this is kind of a base way to get out, and you're more ensured a greater success. The web development in the soil of the hyphae that we talk about is going to just totally hold more water. And so like desert conditions, when I've been invited in to do gardens for people, immediately I can save them 55% on their water bill and improve the quality of their products by 30%. So I feel really fortunate to have been working with these types of microorganisms. I encourage everyone to learn about this, learn about natural farming, Korean natural farming, whatever it is that is soil development for us here in Hawaii. There's other places on the mainland that have other products as well. This one is EM Technologies. It's out of Japan. It's in 300 countries around the world. So it is just considered the most effective in the world by science right now. And if you look at Elaine Ingram or Korean Natural Farming and you're having some challenges, they also say, get some bokashi, let's level those microbes back to where we need to be. You don't need much, but that will help you down the road if you're having any challenges with your natural farming techniques. So this is like the grandfather or the grandmother of digestion, and brought to us so that we can help heal our planet, heal our world. When we did our plants at the university, Dr. Ko, he said, okay, we're going to do 12 plots. We're going to plant them this way. And so we were at his hand telling us how to plant. And said, well, can I have some plots? So he gave me 4 out of the 12 plots. In those 4, I treated them island herb style. They had 4 different seeds in them. Now, university crop came off in 120 days. It was 10 to 12 feet tall. And that was a beautiful sight. Well, the island herbs crop that we planted with the amendments came off at 16 feet.
Wow.
In 120 days. That stock was held above the governor when he signed in the hemp bill. So that is showing that you put in the microbes, and the university guys are telling you, no, this field's ready to go. Plant it, it's ready to go. I'm like, nah, I don't think so, guy. You know, just let's put a little something in here. And so, you know, just well watered one time, and then they took off, and Waimanalo's got great conditions anyway for growing hemp. So that was a huge, huge success. And then the 90% remediation of atrazine in the soil in the first round. Wow, 90%, and non-residual in the plant, mind you. Non-residual in the plant. So those things were just huge. There's other things we have contaminant issues with here in Hawaii, but it's the bacterium that our roots are going to create and grow, and this is how we're going to help grow more bacterium that are beneficial to the soil, help the hemp be more beneficial at making exudates so that it can feed the bacterium and so on and so forth down the line. So we want to increase the ability of our soil to grow and take care of the toxins right in place. We talk about a 2-year remediation of like Roundup, things like that. There's some things that now can improve that. I've recently come across some algae my wife spoke about earlier that actually will accelerate what this does. So we haven't finished technologically. This is a great tool, and I love great tools, and I want to share those. But there are other things that also we have to be aware of that we can put into our fields at very low cost and have huge, huge returns. So I'm talking about building soil, strain and genetics, huge thing. You know, once we get our strain and genetics down, it's going to be everything to us, and everybody's going to have their own genetics. If you talk to growers on the mainland, what you grow on this ridge, you can't necessarily grow on that ridge. They're different. There's the same cut, same plant, but it's going to have a different result. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. So everybody's going to have to develop their own sub-seed strain, so to speak, to really be successful or watch their genetics. Just like we hear 120 inches of rain. You know, that's 150. I've been there. I used to do, you know, rainforest farming basically, and that's how it was. And we still were able to pull off. Well, we lost some to mold or whatever, but we still pulled off crops. So that's important to know that it is possible to breed strains, especially here for Hawaii, that are unique and can, you know, handle their areas. And Greg's work, I kind of echo Greg's work, and I appreciate what he's been doing, working with his strains. I just recently crossed it with the Yuma, so I'm very happy to share that now I'm looking for that east meets west strain. I'm taking his work and trying to further it with the Yuma and saying, okay, she's well adapted, which I can see as well. Have grown the Yuma several times and have cut it down for making wattles or mulch or whatever, but observing her and watching what she does, I still got this education. And so I can see that she has the genetic potential to really service in the crops that we might want to do, and that's like a 1, 2, 3 or tri-crop that we've always talked about. So it's trying to further what he's already been doing and take it on down the road, you know, one more notch, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Right. You know, I don't think there's probably a field in the ground growing hemp or cannabis on the mainland right now. So that is the huge advantage that we have here in Hawaii, is that we're a year-round growing potential. I've got greenhouses where I grow out my seed crops and my clones, and I am in the process of my 5th crop this year, and I'm hoping to have 6 crops by January. So that is one of the best advantages that we have. We don't need 100 acres. And as a small farmer, I can grow 6 times a year, and I figured that I could easily, if I could find somebody to buy it, make $500,000 on an acre of land, because I'm growing out my starts in the greenhouse up to about 3.5 feet and 3 gallons, and as soon as I get done harvesting, I'm replanting. So I'm replanting constantly. Every time I pull out a plant, within a day or so, I'm refertilizing the planting hole and replanting. And so that gives me the ability to continually plant all year round. And that is what makes Hawaii so unique, is the ability to do that. And so that's the one thing I want to really bring up. You know, look where we are in November. I mean, just think about it. And so, yeah, doing a rotation, being on top of it so that you're constantly getting your clones up so that you're ready for the next, the third crop coming, and you're always getting your crops going, then you are able to probably produce, you know, I can't tell you how many pounds an acre because I'm not very good at all that, but I'm just telling you that it has the potential to do a large amount of growing, and it's pretty simple. I mean, I keep everything on the LEDs for 4 hours at night, and I'm all on solar, and I'm all on catchment. I'm completely sustainable. I don't spend any money for energy. So this is what we have here in Hawaii, and this is the advantage we should all take, is really using this sun that we have.
Amen.
So what about your seeds?
Yeah, what about them?
Like, not pounds. I don't care about weed. Seeds.
Seed production?
Correct.
I get about 1,000 pounds per acre on my seed cultivar, low average.
Yeah.
Which is a new normal. Is that what you're asking? What's your seed production?
Yeah, like how many seeds and what's the going rate for seed?
Oh, cost.
You know, when I was in Oregon, we were building shipping containers that are contained, and we were making maybe 20,000 seeds every 60 days or something like that, and it was $1 a seed.
Yeah.
And the investment was 25 grand to build this, whatever. But after 60 days, you know, you're just laughing your whole way to the bank.
Yeah.
But that's what the rate was then. That was like a year ago.
For me, it's like we have everything's kind of experimental, so we don't really know yet. We haven't really taken a half acre and grown it out for seeds. We've just been doing plots, growing out different genetics, growing out the Asperane, the cherry wine, the box, and we've been doing some crossing, so it's more of just researching the seed. But I just got a contract from Puerto Rico, and I sold them 4,000 seeds for $1 a seed.
Nice.
And I went through the whole process of getting legal, and now I have a ability to sell to Puerto Rico directly.
Great.
So that's kind of what my focus is now, is to be in the genetics business and also in the cloning business. So I'm hoping that I can create clones that can be sold to the islands that will be of high CBD clones. So, and then you have the byproduct that you can produce into a salve or into a tincture or whatever.
Well done.
Yeah, and so we have that. We own and run a farmers market, and we have a big concept of Hawaiian grown CBD. And we have a clientele for over a year now that have been coming back to us for a long time because our product really works.
So $1 a seed is pretty good.
No, it's very good.
Personal question: Is that a real significant revenue generator? Just having this right there, the on-site sales platform.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because it's gotten to a point where customers come back all the time because it works so good. They give it to the grandmother wants it. They give it to they send it to somebody in Florida. Florida gets back to us and wants to buy it. So you create your business. It's not huge, but we do over $500 a market, so that's not a bad little income for us. And it has the potential of being a lot bigger. We're actually looking at doing some business with Oregon, because one of our problems here is once you do have a product, you can't really process it because we don't have any guidelines for processing. So I have to take my product and send it to Oregon to have it processed so I can put Hawaiian grown on it. I mean, that's where I'm at right now. So.
By the way, everywhere has its own things where people have to go through hoops, and I like this. You got to make lemonade every time. My product, I'll talk about later, is a result of necessity turning into something great. And Greg, I think the Hawaiian grown value in Oregon is going to even just increase the value even more. So, too bad that Hawaii's not on board yet. But let's stick to cultivation for now. And before we get to Mike, Lely.
I just wanted to contribute. So another popular cannabinoid this year is CBG, and those I'm seeing at about $2 a seed. And the reason I'm mentioning it, it's low CBD, but on a wholesale level, I'm seeing the crude at about 5 times the amount of CBD crude. I'm seeing the distillates in consistent numbers with that, as well as the isolate. So it's something to consider if you want to get ahead of the market. They do exist, and it's something to be aware of. Thank you.
Doug, you should mention like the grain and fiber seed from Europe and Canada. Any
anywhere from $2.50 to $8 a pound.
Yeah, I was going to go get on that to the next round. By the way, thank you to Mars Beagle, Lizzie, Lori, and everybody at WAPA, Colorado and Company for sponsoring this group. Thank you for Hawaii, and don't miss the NOCO Hemp Expo. And also the Hawaii Farmers Union and everybody that worked so hard to make this happen, all the vendors and everybody that gave their time and energy to make this magical thing happen. So I don't want to yak too long, but really quickly, since I do develop tri-cropping cultivar, here's how the pricing structure goes. I'm a big believer in food and seed security, which means own your genetics. We have an opportunity to change the model that farmers have been served to for the last century or so. And so I charge a not CBD level for my genetics, but significantly higher than what I'll talk about in a second. But it's yours. It comes with the right of replication and you own it. And the only exception to that is if you decide to go in the genetics business from something deriving from my genetics, I get a small royalty. But do what you want with it. It's your product, regrow it, blend it, brand it. I don't give a shit. So that's my model. I'm not a big fan for various reasons, for things I've been through, of legacy genetics from either Canada or Europe in general. There are some great ones. There's great Italian fiber cultivars, don't get me wrong. But the fact that Europe and Canada is looking to the United States to get their genetics now just confirms Michael Pollan's statement that American cannabis farmers are the best farmers of his generation. But it is true, let's say that you want to do a high volume hemp hearts. Is anybody not familiar with hemp hearts? It's when the hull is removed from the seed, it's this, so I like to eat the whole seed now that I have tons of quantity from growing, but it's a fantastic thing that I had in my yogurt this morning, super protein I carried everywhere I go in case I get stranded while traveling. Hawaiian cacao nibs being the other two things in my carry-on bags, always. For those type of cultivars, you can get like $2 a pound, $3 a pound, but you can't replant. You get it? And so that may be fine as long as you've got, because that's significantly cheaper than a cultivar like mine is. If you have a long-term game plan, mine's way cheaper. But if you want to go year after year, you have a good relationship with European cultivar, and you're confident that their prices and consistency and all that are going to keep going, there's a role for paying much less for your genetics. I'm rambling, but really quick. Certified. I really strongly feel that hemp programs should not have certified seed for the first 5 to 10 years because of Michael Pollan's assertion, the truth of it, and that we should be allowed to develop any genetics that are 0.3 and have been cultivated by a permitted U.S. hemp farmer should be allowed to be transferred anywhere in any of the 50 states for you to grow. After 5 to 10 years, if a state wants to do what all commercial other crops do, which is set up certified seed programs so that people know what commercial varieties they're getting, that's fine, because by then the Gregs of the world will have developed enough cool shit to win on a level playing field when you have a certification process. So, I'll stop there.
Where was I? I forgot.
Farming.
Farming.
Farming. Dig the dirt. Yeah.
Hawaii.
I was just traveling through the West this summer, and I was on hemp farms in New Mexico where the government is giving out grants to farmers to plant, Not quite happening here. I was in Colorado where I got friends that have 7.5 acres and they had a successful harvest. They got it in before the frost, just barely. And I was in stores in Portland and in Colorado, and there's like a pot shortage because all the pot growers are growing hemp, which created a seed shortage last spring for hemp growers. And so that's kind of, and if you just have a small space and you want to be involved, be a breeder. Breed these things. The plant wants to be evolved. It wants to be developed. And that's what we're all doing, right? As we develop this plant to meet our needs and help us save the planet, it's evolving us. It's developing us to be the best human beings we can be.
Yeah.
So there's a symbiotic relationship there. And I'm fascinated to be here on the planet at this time doing this work. It's, I think, what a lot of us are called to do. And it's just fascinating to be on the cutting edge because there's so many breakthroughs happening. There's so many materials coming out.
Cedar clone.
I'm doing both now. I've grown indoors for 10 years in Seattle, and I did a lot of clone work there. And there's a lot of stories around that, but I'm doing seeds. I'm working with Greg here. We're introducing Ruderalis. You know Ruderalis? There's a 28 to 45 day from seed to harvest cycle. That's fast.
That's really fast.
They can't inspect it that fast. So the heroes, Lynette Shaw's here. What a hero. Thank you for your work. Mike Ruggles just had a breakthrough victory. 4 years he was fighting. That's a breakthrough for all of us. And don't forget Roger Christie, who uses it in his ministry in the sacrament.
For those who don't know, those names are people on Hawaii who have suffered under the drug war in the final battles. When it's over, people, we won. Okay.
Yeah. Celebrating tonight, right?
Oh yeah.
We're watching the fungi movie and celebrating. Okay. So I just want to say quickly, when you're growing it out and seeds pop up, or if you're doing clones and the seeds or the sprouts and the clones kind of wither and die, you want to give them more water because they're not getting enough water, they're just drying up. But that's called damping off. Everybody know damping off?
That's from too much water.
That's from too much water, right. So you have to do just the opposite. So get over that. That's a big lesson. And then we put them in light rooms. We grow them up a certain height, usually about 2 to 3 feet. And if you're doing it right, it'll grow another 2 to 3 times after that in a very quick time. So you get 6 to 9 foot plants very quickly. When you put them in the ground, we use polymers. Do people know what polymers are? Okay, so there's sodium-based polymers that most nurseries use when they transplant trees and things into the garden. And then there's potassium-based polymers from Germany that when they break down, they're fertilizer. And they'll last for years. So they're little crystals, and when you put them in water, they swell up. So I put the fertilizer right in there with it. I put the biology right in there with it. The biodynamics go right in the polymer. And I also use banana extract. And if you're familiar with Korean natural farming, you cut up a banana flower, you coat it with sugar, you put it in a bucket, you cover the whole thing with sugar. In 5 days, that'll be a liquid that you use for your fertilizer to really stimulate the biology of the soil around the plant. But you put that in your polymer, and they have a constant supply of biology and encouragement from, the bacteria from the banana flower. And that goes a long ways to getting them up to 6 to 9 feet tall. The sun is great. I've done a lot of work indoors with the lights. The lights have made great advancements. Even the LED lights are good now. We get great results. And let's see. There's 4 things that you consider when you're growing. You want to have your soil, which we talked about. You want to have your air. All the qualities of air, which is temperature, humidity, and wind. So you want to watch that. You can't have too much wind. If you're growing in a light room, you want to use an oscillating fan. You don't want to just blow on the plants. You want to have the fan move around. Remember that. Water and your fertilizer. That's really important. Do people know when to use what type of fertilizer during the plant cycle? You focus on the nitrogen, then you go to the potassium, phosphorus, build up the buds, things like that. And the strains, like I was saying, working with Greg is amazing. And working with everybody. I hope everybody comes next year with their personal little stack of seeds. We can have a seed sharing thing. That'd be fun. Yeah. And bring an egg carton. Then you can put each strain in each egg thing. Yep. 12 of them right there, 12 strains right there. I was wondering if anyone had any questions.
You know, let's wait just a little while, maybe try to quickly get through, unless someone's got an urgent thing, and then we'll take some questions at the end, just so we get time to go through everything.
So as far as growing, the thing I've learned is the hardest thing to teach people is how to water plants. It seems like the most simplest thing in the world. I'm teaching people every year, and it's just very hard. The easiest way I've learned is to teach people in 1 gallons and 5 gallon pots, and then just, you know, how do you know? You pick them up and you feel if they're light. You know, if they're light, they need water. That's the hardest thing that I found in growing weed. If anybody cares about that, but that's an important thing. And biochar is a thing that I've been using for a minute, and it's a really good way to sequester carbon into the soil. And if you just make some really high quality compost, and you definitely want to, you know, get that into your biochar first, you can't just put it into the soil, and use just a small amount, like between 8 to 10%. And they're going smaller now. They're saying less percentages than before. I usually go 5 to 8, but you can go up higher, but you just have to make sure it's been inoculated well with compost. That's about all I got.
I just want to say something about water. On my crop, I water almost never. I mean, we get enough rain that it just manages itself. I mean, the plant's pretty stable. So once you get it established in the ground, I think my best crop, I think I watered twice. And so it's just a matter of letting nature do most of it, you know.
Yeah,
I'm on South Point, yeah.
Does it rain?
Well, it does where I'm at.
Does it?
Yeah, where I'm at. I'm not that far down South Point, just about 3 miles down.
Okay.
So I'm still, actually, it's pretty amazing. You go another 3 miles and it's probably 20 inches a year. You come up to where I'm at, it's about 60 inches a year. Yeah, and lately we've been getting more rain than we've had in a long time. So in the last 3 years, it's just been almost ideal as far as rain. Evening rains almost every night, every night. So it doesn't always work that way, but for the last few years, we've been very blessed to be able to just let nature do most of the watering.
That's how we grow in Vermont too. In Vermont, we grow dry crop, and it's a misnomer. It's not dry. So we'll do a quick speed round here. We got about 10 minutes left. Anybody has any final points, and then folks can take some questions. Briefly, I want to talk about soil. What I do on my home crop, small hand-planted crop that for genetic development is gather mycelium from the ecosystem, from the watershed above our ranch. And brew it out because according to a natural farming kind of mode, into a compost tea that we, in a rice medium at first, rice sugar medium, that we then infuse. And I can't believe how well it works. Like I had learned it because I was consulting for a tribe's hemp project. I learned it from that, then tried it on my own crop, and then by middle of the season, you just break a little bit of soil, and there's these veins and like fractals of the most. We know who saw the movie last night. Yeah. That's what we're talking about, right? It really works. But the thing about it when you do it from your local watershed is that it knows and likes. It plays nice with all the other microbes, and so you over time have to do fewer and fewer amendments and less of it, and it's just a great way to get fungus going. I'm lucky that I'm an organic goat farmer, so I just put goat poop mixed with alfalfa on there, and then the only other thing that I added to our hemp crop was some like trace mineral kelp kind of stuff. Quickly on products, we'll talk more on a marketing panel, but I just want to urge everyone. We heard folks just like poetry talking about solar power for their. This is the number one thing. It's ninth inning for humanity. It doesn't matter if you're doing something righteous, if you're burning a ton of fuels or buying slave labor materials. So like, I'm trying to walk the walk in my product with compostable labels with non-toxic stickum, and they're so freaking expensive. It pains me. But you get what I'm saying is we got to try to walk the walk here in every level. Treat your people well, profit sharing. No one's a wage slave. Like there's no more time for BS. We got to try to be righteous. Echoing the constant effort on the genetics. likewise in the Samurai cultivar, this tri-crop I've been developing this year, we crossed it in New Mexico with a special sauce. You guys know that cultivar, special sauce CBD cultivar, which is really low in THC. I don't really care that much about CBD adding to my cultivar because it has a nice cannabinoid balance, I think, already, with some other cultivars in it. But heck, if these resulting seeds, we'll do some greenhouse work in Oregon over the winter. If they jack up CBD, I'm not complaining. Spacing, we didn't talk about spacing. I'll let these guys run at it when they are talking about their plants, but generally speaking, ganja farmers in the Emerald Triangle know that every plant, it's like a prima donna. You love every plant and you want every flower to be good. You want to maximize flowers, so huge bases, like 60-inch bases. For my tri-crop cultivar, I've learned over time to plant a lot tighter. They do grow into those Christmas tree beautiful plants, but unless you have a lot of people to hand harvest, which I sometimes like to do, you may want to plant tighter for ease of harvesting if you're growing on a small scale for seed, for dioecious seed. So maybe like 7 at the minimum, 7 to 13 inches, what I've been running on my cultivars. And then the last thing is, we all love the big plants. We all go ooh and ah about big plants, and so feel free to go ooh and ah. But just to echo, and the crops that Kev was describing, this was a University of Hawaii crop we grew that is so massive. And when I told the story yesterday, when I showed it to a fiber guy saying, hey, this University of Hawaii project I'm working on, we grew this killer fiber cultivar, look at this. He nearly fainted because of the difficulty it would take in processing it. So, you know, if you like growing huge trees, that's awesome, but think about your final application when you're cultivating.
Thank you. So genetics-wise, we could get genetics and grow 33 footers easily if we wanted to, but we won't be doing that. 16 feet seems to be the processing. The processing, you know, of 32 footers is prohibited. It dulls our equipment too quickly. So 12 and 16 footers is really what we're looking for. As far as building soil, building healthy soil, I am a resourceitarian. I like to look at what's available locally. If you look at successful hemp farms on the mainland, they're gathering all the local greens and leaves and wood, whatever they can from their own farms in order to culture and perform with their crop. We have a few things locally to us on the Big Island we're very blessed to have. One is like rock dust from quarrying. So you can get a masonry mix from any quarry, and that's got about a quarter of its rock dust. The other particles are pretty sizable. But they're still great for long-term soil development. So rock dust, you know, ton per acre per annum is kind of a great way to start building your farm at a very low cost at $30 a ton. So it's the cost of spreading is what's going to be a cost. The other thing is the biochar. On the Big Island, we do have access to some biochar. There's a Kevlar plant over there, so we're very fortunate we can get fairly inexpensive biochar. There's a fellow that does Pacific biochar as well. Inoculated biochar, he's really good at that. But those things are going to hold nutrition, so the biochar is like a sponge and a hotel for nutrition as well as a home for our microorganisms. So it's giving them condos to move into, basically, and holding calcium requirements, which is huge in a lot of places here in Hawaii. So if we can do the soil food web that's developed under there to catch the nutrients, catch the moisture, and then the charcoal is going to store like calcium. If you do calcium amendments with biochar, only 5 years after that, you have all the calcium you need for that soil for a long, long time. You don't have to keep adding work. Normally, some places like the Humboldt, adjust your calcium over there on the other side of our forest. It's 15 tons per acre. Calcium is very difficult to manage that kind of volume of fertilization and what you need to bring the soil back into pH and all that stuff. So if we develop soil and hold those nutrients right at the surface where they can utilize the plant, and the soil pH will be adjusted by microbes in a shorter time, and we could add that 15 tons per acre. So behaving with microorganisms and biochar and inoculating and giving the minerals that land needs, because we've depleted our mineral supply in all of our lands across the United States that have been commercially farmed. It's so important to remineralize, not just so the plants have something to eat, but so the microbes have something to eat. And we'll see them proliferate. When we feed them really well, they're going to be the ones that take off. And then once they've taken off, they're going to give us our best results from the plants. So again, gather what you can from your area. You know, learn to make your own bokashi or on-farm fertilizers, and that's your best thing. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes some research.
You wanted to talk about spacing. Well, first of all, when you're a small farmer like me, I'm an example of what one person with the help from my friends can do on a very small space. And so what I do is I have about 400 holes that I've dug with my tractor and my post hole digger, and I fertilize those holes and I replant in them over and over again. So once I pull the plant, I replant. So I space them really good so there's plenty of airflow around them, which keeps the mold out. And I work on this concept of how many crops can I get away with in a year. And so that makes it a little easier for me to do it on a smaller scale. So, a half acre, you can produce quite a bit of plants in a whole year. And 400 plants, sounds like a lot, but it's manageable. You start getting into acreage, then you're talking about a whole different kind of labor costs, a different kind of equipment that you need, different kind of drying. I can dry, a crop in a week, and then 2 weeks later put another crop in and dry that, so I don't have to be using big spaces to dry. Now we've got someone here, Ray, who's doing it on a bit larger scale, and it would be kind of good to hear what he has to say, because he's doing 3-4 acres in more of a larger processing, and that's probably my next step. I'm going to gear up to trying to do what he's doing, but he can probably address a larger crop grow than what we are doing here. We're all fairly small farmers. He's kind of reaching for the next level. He's doing 3 now, but he's looking at 300, I think, possibly.
Do you want me to make a comment?
Yes, I do.
Can you step up to the mic? Yeah.
By the way, we haven't talked about post-harvest and drying things, so just find someone and talk to them about it afterwards, since we're done in our...
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment about spacing, because, I've tried a variety of spacing, like how many can I stick in here? And what I've learned is if you want them tall, get them wide, because the closer they are, the more shading that you have, lower in the plant. You're not getting any weight down there, and you're not supporting the plant. All you're doing is like burning the energy, making the plant taller. So I think if you want a close packing, like 3 or 4 feet in the row, then you're going to need to be 6 feet apart, those rows, and the plant should be about this tall. Finish at about this tall, and you'll get the maximum size of each individual plant before they start shading each other out. And north to south facing rows, if you can possibly optimize your planting, the way you lay out the field. And I'm using drip. I'm using some plastic. It's like, and I'm doing what Greg does. I'm establishing a field and laying out the plastic, putting down the drip, and planting into the plastic and fertigating through the irrigation lines, and not using a lot of water, like letting the crop tell me what it needs. And soil is crucial. In this one place where I'm at right now, I did the whole cation balance, before I got started there. And with one handful of pre-plant granulated chicken manure, there wasn't a speck of yellow in the field 3 weeks ago. It was like, but they were too tall, and the 30-mile-an-hour wind came through and laid everything down. And I have them under lights too. Okay, this acre is under lights, and so I kept it longer because conditions were perfect. We had this hot, humid intensity going on. It's like they really swelled. So I think spacing. I'm going to solve my spacing problems by just keeping them shorter. So that would be it.
They grow out they grow out 1/3. Like if you're doing a pot, they generally put 1/3 out more of the pot. Like that's a good way to go by. That I learned from spacing. As far as the big plants, like he was saying, you keep them short because unless you're growing for biomass, you're growing stems and leaves. You really want to grow flowers. So I top them and get them, you know, a couple times because the smaller the buds, the less mold you're going to get too. You start growing a great big, oh, they're beautiful buds, and you open them up and they're freaking rotten inside. So especially if you have wet areas, it's good to.
We're doing what I saw on many farms in Colorado this summer, and that's 2-foot rows and 16-inch planting. So we get a lot more plants. We can get up to, I'm hoping for 5,000 acres. I'm sorry, 5,000 plants in an acre. Is that what you do?
I took 20,000 square feet, and I probably did 3,000 plants. 20,000 square feet, and I did around 3,000 plants. Depends if I'm doing light deprivation, which is what he's doing, but backwards. Because you guys don't need to be covering, you need to be lighting.
Right, so anyway, it's by the plant, and then we keep that supply. If we can get up to 5,000 plants, we got another 5,000 on the way. We're taking care of 10,000 plants at a time. The only way you can do that is if you're growing for medicine, like CBD, because the price point's way up. It costs about $15,000 an acre to pay for the labor to take care of these plants because we're treating them as individuals rather than broadcasting the seeds out. When you broadcast the seeds out, they naturally grow 6 inches apart, and then you're just growing for the stems. It's a different crop. It hasn't been evolved yet to get below the THC thing, but fortunately that's behind us, right? That's over. That's done. Okay. And so if you look at where it grows natural in Kansas, it's just a field. They're about 6 inches apart, and they have big juicy buds all over them. They're just wet with, oh, beautiful.
I just wanted to ask a question about stability because I know a lot of people are buying seeds that are, you know, younger generations, maybe second, third, fourth generation. Can you just educate the crowd a little bit about the importance of having, you know, 7th generation and how they can vary in each direction for stability purposes?
I know, I guess we all could. What I do, and I'm growing THC, mind you, but I'll grow 100 plants. If I want to make a new strain, I'll grow 100 plants, and I'll pick one out of those 100, and then cross it with itself. And if I want to make seeds to stay with, you want to do that, you know, a lot of times. So I think that's what's going on with hemp now, is a lot of people are not doing it. They're not doing the back work, so.
I want to really quickly say, because I'm be against the grain in general, that although I agree with that, and I'm trying to do it in the cultivars that I really am focusing on, I do like unicorns, and I do like the idea of there being a niche craft market like fine wines and champagnes. I'm talking top shelf, where the vintage of 2024 is going to be different than the vintage of 2023, and that's something that can be celebrated at an effective price point, where as this is different than an industrial model of every plant exactly the same every time, and that is valuable in certain kind of markets, especially wholesale markets where you're trying to maximize your percentage of CBD or another cannabinoid.
I want to address seed and spacing. If we were looking to put in a fiber crop, you're talking about 80 pounds per acre, really closely drilled, very thick. You couldn't necessarily walk through it when it came time to harvest without some kind of equipment. If you're talking more of a seed crop, you may only put 20 pounds per acre and get a really good seed crop. It's a little bit smaller plant, but a weightier plant. And we're looking for seed. And if you do a medicinal crop, we talk about anywhere from 1,500 plants per acre to like 6,000 plants per acre, depending on if you're raising them up under lights and then putting them out, or you're doing like a sea of green where you're just making seeds and putting them out every 18 inches on a 2-foot row. So there's different spacings and different costs of seeds, obviously, as well. That seed that's going to cost you 80 pounds of seed per acre has got to be really cheap to buy that, because you're going to have to get some good returns to see if there's $1 a seed. So obviously there's going to be a big fluctuation in the cost of seed depending on what varieties and what you're planting for.
And when you talk about, like she said about getting your seeds fourth, fifth generation, one of the great advantages here is that you can almost do that in a year. Because if you're dealing with 4 or 5 crops in a year, you can actually develop a strain in almost a year or 2 that's really been, developed up to 4 or 5 crops. That's why it's on the mainland, unless you do it indoors. And the trouble is that we don't want to do it indoors because what we're trying to do is get this plant to adapt to the sun. So you really want these plants to go through 4 generations under these conditions that we have, so they learn to adapt to these conditions. So we're trying to get it to these, so you got a plant that's going to take 13 hours or 12 hours and not go to flower so quickly. So the goal is to kind of continually just develop in it so that because I've gotten seeds from Colorado that even though they were under lights or were outdoors, they popped and started flowering in a month, and so but then I've taken those same seeds and I've used them, for a couple of years, and now they have adapted to a point where, they don't start flowering for 3 months or more. Now, you have to think that when you're doing it outdoors and you're not under lights, I've planted, but actually I've had plants come up that just came up well when I was doing my seed crop. And I didn't touch them, I didn't water them, I didn't do anything to them. They got 20 feet tall, and they went through about almost 9 months before they started to go to flower. But as soon as you start growing them under lights and you take them out of the lights, then they're going to start going into flower. So if you start planting in April or May, you can have an 8-month crop without having to worry about too much. Because once they get established and they get used to the light, then they seem to just keep adapting to it. And I've got a stock at home that's that big around. I'm showing you that big around. Yeah, it's a Yuma that was crossed with one of my CBD strains.
That's what we call a boom stock.
Yeah. And so I'm actually going into the walking stick business because I'm starting to take all my sticks and I've got them all. I sand them and I stain them and I sell them at the farmer's market for $25. Nice little walking stick, and they're super light. They're like titanium. It's a new product. It's a byproduct of my other byproduct, which is the other byproduct.
Can you just say something about how you grow specifically for a seed crop as opposed to bud that
Yeah, that has a lot to do with your males. Separating your males out so that you know exactly what your male is that you're going to pollinate your plant with. So if you have, like what I did on my last crop, I had some acid rain and some cherry wine and a cherry wine cobbler, and I grew them out and the males and females came up, and I pulled all the males but 1 or 2, and I kept them in bags, and then when it was time to harvest, I'd pull them up, time to pollinate, I would pull them up and just shake them onto the plant, and then I went to that other crop which was a ways away, and I did the same thing, and then the other one was further away, and I did them with their own, genetics, so that I can keep the same genetics. It's a little bit tricky. I can't guarantee anything because I'm not as controlled as you should be, but I feel like my genetics are pretty good. But pollen can go anywhere, so it's very difficult to be able to say, yes, these are going to all be pure, cherry wine. Because, you never know when a male pops up someplace, especially when you're doing as much research as I have, and there's so many males popping up all over. And I just got a call from my guy, and he said, I just pulled up 15 more males today. I pulled up 10 a couple days ago, right? They're just popping like that. I've got my crop.
You do have time to identify them before they're in the pollen phase.
Right. And you've got to get them out of there and move them and just take them as far away as you can, and just hopefully that they don't, because one little flower can pop up, and then you've got your plants that get pollinated.
Keep the male plants alive somewhere else, and you said inside of a bag?
Well, once they start to grow to flower or close to it, I put a bag over the top of them. I've seen sometimes what they do is they trim all the bottom leaves and they leave one big bud, a big male bud, and then they put a bag over the top of that, and they wait till it goes to flower, and then they go out. Some of them, they just take the pollen and they take a little paintbrush and they brush it on. I just take the whole wand and just pop it onto the plant, and I pollinate my plant after.
So what kind of a bag? I'm picturing like a plastic
No
bag.
plastic. The whole thing will rot inside. It's got to be a paper bag.
Okay, so the plant's gonna like die at that point, so you kind of have to use it pretty soon after that?
Yeah.
You can refrigerate the pollen.
I take a plastic bag and stick it over and then just beat on the thing and you just got a bag of pollen.
Yeah,
I keep that in the
that's another
freezer
way
and
to
when
do
I
it.
get the female that I want to, have it play with or whatever, I take the bag and stick it over the bud and then just shake it like shake and bake chicken, and then you've got that bud with those seeds from that male that you want, and it didn't go all over the rest of the plant.
Yeah.
And all the other, because I'm trying not to make seeds as hard as I can.
Yeah.
Except for them.
So what we're talking about is hybridization. We're talking about characteristics of the plant, which are called phenotypes. And you can do this by breeding the seeds. And the seeds have a memory, a DNA memory that goes back generations that help the plant survive. But there's also new phenotypes that just, I think, are coming from the cosmos that are coming in. And if you want to get there quickly, you can do clones, and you can hybridize very quickly with clones. And when you get something you really like, really want, then you tissue culture it. That all those plants are going to be the same identical plant that you like. So cloning and tissue culturing for quicker turnaround, longer term, more encapsulated DNA pods. These seeds work really well too.
I want to say one thing about feminization, because I'm doing my first feminized crop right now. And I have a greenhouse that's got about 50 plants in it. They're in 25-gallon containers. I've been under lights for quite a while. I've got my silver nitrate and a couple other chemicals that I mix into a formula. And I have a spray bottle. And I've taken about 10 of the 50 and I've been spraying them with this chemical. What this chemical does is it stresses out the female to think that, oh my God, I've got to produce male flower because I need to, make flower. I'm freaking out. I don't know what's going on. So they produce these male flowers on the female plant. Those male flowers will produce only female seeds. So by pollinating the rest of the crop, and this crop is all clones, so they're all female and they're all coming from the same plant. So by doing that, I can take that female pollen and pollinate the rest of the whole crop, and hopefully I'm going to have a very large crop of feminized, the first Hawaiian feminized seed. And that's kind of like my goal. Now, I've never done this before, so this is really an experiment, but if I can pull this off, that's a goal of mine, because he loves males. I hate males.
Can you speak a little bit to the timing of all that? Like when you're taking the male and when you're introducing it to the female, or if you're taking a reverse plant when, I guess, you want to hit the other female?
You can kind of tell just when the flowers are popping and the the females are receptive. It's pretty easy to tell when it's time to pollinate.
Better to seed early so that seed can really develop and get encased.
Yeah.
The boys have balls coming out.
And I only do it once because if you do it in the field, they'll pollinate, constantly, and half of them won't mature. So you've got a bunch of crappy seed. So you're better off trying to just pollinate it at one time and keep the males away, and let them go to full maturity. One of the real problems, though, with growing seed is that you can almost guarantee that a seed crop is going to be over 0.3 because you're trying to grow it to full maturity. So it's very difficult to stay within the guidelines. And it's probably something that we should talk about, because if we're going to do seed genetics, it's almost impossible for us to be able to stay under 0.3 because you're taking this thing to its complete maturity.
Vermont does not test its dioecious seed permit holders for that reason. If you grow the seeded crop, Vermont is not interested in THC testing your crop. Why not Hawaii?
Right. We just wrote that down to suggest that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants a few seeds, just come on up. I'll give you some.
Thank you, and I wanted to once again thank NOCO and Global CBD for sponsoring the hemp tent, making this possible. And Doug Fine has 15 books